Hey everybody, hopefully you can hear me and see me. There we go. Like literally a minute before the appointed hour for our webinar, the power went out. Lost power, lost connection, had to go back into our webinar server to get things going again. So sorry about that. That means I have to reload the presentation, and that will give me a second to talk for just a second. I'm going to do that thing that men cannot do very well, which is multitask. And it'll take about 2 minutes for us to upload this PowerPoint and for all the great content that I have planned for you. While we're going into this, I wanted to talk just a little bit about Alzheimer's. You've heard me talk about Alzheimer's before and the issue with this disease. It's growing at an alarming rate. More and more people are getting Alzheimer's, and that's not a very great idea. By the way, if you can hear me, send me a text and let me know that. Oh, Bob, thank you very much. It looks like I can be heard and be seen. So, and don't forget, I'm doing better at checking the sideboard for messages. So if you have any questions on today's program, send me a little bit of a message, and I'll enter it before I end for the day. Let's see how well I do with answering all your questions before you even have to ask them, right? All right, let's go back to my slide presentation. It'll tell me when we're uploading. All right. Anyway, this Saturday, I'm turning 57 years old. That's right, 57 years old, pretty awesome. I say awesome because I think all of us can look at age in a different way. One is we're afraid of age. We don't like age. Age means, debilitating, not being able to do the things that we want to do, right? And another way of looking at age is the wisdom that comes along with it, the great experiences, having grandchildren, seeing our children grow and mature, seeing the rest of the world. We're generally more financially able to do things as we age than when we're young. So there's some advantages to it. We're afraid of it because a lot of disease comes with it, a weaker body, a weaker mind. And we're going to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia as one of the elements of a weaker mind. But I have a very close friend, been friends since I was 21. Him and his wife were friends with my wife when our family and me, when we were starting our families. We did all, the traditional things, going to parks, picnics, get-togethers, and we even went camping several times, and just a great family. They had children, as we did, and about 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with dementia. And that means that she was diagnosed with dementia about 52 years old. And it was fast. Soon after a couple of years, she had full-on Alzheimer's, and she had it for about a year and a half, and then it took her life. At 50, not even 57, her birthday just barely passed a few days ago. At 56 years old. The trend that's happening is happening to us at a younger age. And what is that? We're going to talk about that. I got my program up now, our PowerPoint. So let's go into that and get started about what we can do about this crazy disease. So as always, I'd like to welcome you to the weekly program of the 3 Believe Wellness Program, found at www.3believe.com, the number 3, not spelled out, the numeral. And if you have any questions, you can call in 866-832-3543. Make sure you have the name of the person that invited you to this program so that you get the proper care that you should be getting. And let's go into why I'm here. I'm a food scientist. What that means is that I go in and biohack foods, make them healthier. A little bit of an insult to Mother Nature, like what right do I have? What assumption do I have that I can make food healthier? Well, it's mainly about our comfort foods, things that we all love, but we're not necessarily the healthiest food for us. So I go in specializing in the treatment of chronic disease and metabolic syndrome, things that's really affecting all of us. I work with doctors and clinics all around the country, training their staff, training the doctors. Unfortunately, they don't spend a lot of time in nutrition. They don't really go through telling them what the latest research is in our food and supplements. They focus mostly on treatment care, which means what happens after I've had an accident or after I have the disease, rather than how do I prevent it. But the shift is happening because you, the patients, are telling your doctors, I want more. The reason why is because most people have these statistics. Sadly, your friends, your neighbors, the people you see on the street have high levels of chronic disease, and it's not getting any better. At least 80% of the people you know have one of these conditions, if not more than one, and the trend is getting worse and worse. I had it 11 years ago. I was 280 pounds. I wrestled 191 in college, so I was a bigger guy, but not that big. I had over 10 chronic diseases. I say over 10 because I realized that now, as I've become more educated and it's my profession, I had chronic diseases that I recognize now that I didn't know that I had back then. And understanding some of the blood tests that I had back then and interpreting them, I had more than I thought I did. But following the same advice that I give you every week, after 12 weeks, I had none. I was able to do it without medication, and I'm all the better for it. Now, I want to throw out a disclaimer. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a food scientist. This information should only be used for informational purposes. Always consult your doctor when making a lifestyle change. That's good advice. The content and examples shared are from personal stories, my stories and the people that write in stories, and don't claim to be a cure of any disease or ailment. All right, now that we got that aside, let's go into what we're talking about, Alzheimer's. Can we prevent it? You know, memory is the mother of all wisdom, a fundamental part of being human. But Alzheimer's disease slowly robs the mind of its memory, its ability to communicate, its ability to survive. Without our memory, what are we? If you gathered all of our experiences together, some say that is the experiences that we've had, that is the net result of who we are. And if we can't remember those experiences, then what are we? Reports show that every 5 years after the age of 65, your chances of getting dementia doubles. And that frankly presents a really scary proposal. Because I know that there's people here right now listening that are over 65 or approaching 65. And so let me ask you, does the chances of dementia and Alzheimer's double because of being the age of 65 and older, or is the cause something else? And are the advancing years merely a correlated statistic and not the cause? Well, we're going to go into that. Medical science has not currently identified a cure and any treatments for Alzheimer's. A recent study that I just, or a symposium that I listened to, was a doctor, a PhD, that was talking about the drugs used right now for Alzheimer's is about $1 billion a year industry and growing. And the studies that have been done, a meta study, so several studies put together, looking at the value of the current Alzheimer's medications found that they do not one does any good. Striking that, in fact, some of them actually make the conditions of Alzheimer's advance faster and make the conditions worse. Now, is there something wrong with that? Is that not actually, sorry about that, is that actually not the opposite of what should be going on? Should we not be doing harm when practicing medicine? And so that is a striking and fearful reality, is that the medications, we don't have a cure right now. So my argument is this: more and more mounting research suggests that Alzheimer's can be delayed, all right, and even prevented. Absolutely. It is very possible to have a healthy older age with an intact memory and cognitive function. In this episode, we're going to explore how your lifestyle choices today might affect your chances of cognitive decline in the future. Another scary statistic is emerging, that people are getting dementia, as I talked about earlier, Alzheimer's and dementia at a younger age. It's not happening to only the elderly. And I told you about my friend. It's not just her. It's more and more people. And the research that's coming out is pointing to the amount of time that your body is in a particular physiological state as the cause, and that it is that state, that physical state that you're in, that is causing the dementia and Alzheimer's, instead of the actual age of your body. Now, make sure you understand that clearly. What I'm saying is, it's not a magical number at 65 and you're going to get Alzheimer's. What it is how long has your body been in a certain physical state, and during that state, those years added up is what actually is causing the Alzheimer's from happening. One study showed that 1 year of brisk walking daily, not running, just brisk walking, was enough to roll back the aging clock in terms of dementia by about 1 to 2 years. Now, that's not a cure, but it's interesting because it slows it down. Now, this is people that after they already have signs of dementia. That means that physical exercise has a positive impact on delaying Alzheimer's. One very recent study found that adhering to a Mediterranean diet had better cognition over people that eat the traditional American diet. The Mediterranean diet is a lower carb diet compared to what most Americans eat. Now, it's not as low as the type of diet that we recommend here on this channel. But the reason I found this study interesting because it showed improvements when the amount of carbs is lower. Not as low as ours, but still lower than what most people are following, and a diet where their fats were increased. Science is telling us these signals. Science is telling us that exercise, that lowering the carbohydrates in your diet, that increasing your healthy fats, getting enough sleep, and learning new things are the keys from walking away from this horrible, horrible disease. All right. I honestly believe that based on the studies that I've read, that better than 80 to 90% of Alzheimer's is completely preventable. The condition is chronic, it's degenerative, and ultimately it's terminal. So sorry to be so macabre about those things, but these are the hallmarks of the disease. Clinically speaking, it is a memory loss issue. And it's not just that you're forgetting things, it's that your brain is essentially forgetting how to communicate with the rest of your body, which ultimately results in death. Now let's look at what Alzheimer's does to your brain. In a healthy brain, billions of neurons, here's an image of neurons in your brain, send messages to each other back and forth via electronic or chemical signals. Like from your vagus nerve, from your digestive system, from your biome up to your brain. So through electrical or chemical signals, these synaptic connections through which messages will travel is how your brain keeps the rest of your body working and functioning. This is an image, an actual image of neurons and the toxic deposits that'll accumulate. So that almost looks like smoke. Okay, that smoke around the neurons is an accumulation of a protein called beta amyloid. It's kind of like a plaque deposit that blocks glucose from feeding your brain energy. Without energy, well, your brain cells die, just like all of us do. This amyloid seems to attract another brain protein that then will form these fibrous clumps inside your brain. And these clumps disrupt the brain's messaging ability so that your body loses control over the rest of your body. Basically, an Alzheimer brain is a starving brain, a brain that starves to death. And so simply put, eating foods that create a high insulin level, like too many carbohydrates and sugars, is a primary cause of getting dementia and Alzheimer's. Years of insulin flooding your brain cells cause the beta amyloid plaque. It's kind of like it cuts out the neuron and inserts this beta amyloid itself in the past. So you see here these little scissors, and the beta amyloid is that kind of that yellowish green that's cutting the neuron, inserting itself inside there, blocking this plaque, blocking the glucose from feeding energy to your brain cells, and starves it to death. To me, the best way to prevent this from happening is to stop the plaque from forming in the first place, which means that a low insulin diet, such as the one that we teach, is what the science is telling us that we need to do. Now, until recently, seeing the buildup of the beta amyloid was only detectable after the person had already died. Thanks largely to some really smart Australian researchers, with advanced imaging, it can now be seen while you're still living. Look at these images. You can see on the left a normal brain. See on the right where you have those yellow and red spots? That is a live imaging of these amyloid buildup. Basically what you're seeing is the brain cells that are starving. They're not getting glucose fed to the brain, and so therefore they're dying of energy, starving your brain to death. Now, this is great news. Not that people have it, but this is great news that means to get Alzheimer's, it takes a long time. It's not like it's an accident and you slip on a banana and fall into a puddle of Alzheimer's. And because it takes so long, you have time to stop doing what it is that causes this terrible disease. The interesting thing about the disease is it is a glucose-starving, insulin-flooding disease. Because your brain is being starved of glucose, you would think that the solution is to give your brain more glucose. The research is telling us that is not the answer. The first thing you need to remember is your brain can use another energy source when there isn't enough glucose. And that source is your beloved, the one that we always talk about, ketones. The energy that is produced when you starve or reduce your carbohydrate levels, but only possible if your insulin levels are lower. And you know how to get your insulin levels lower. Stop eating carbs and sugars. Your insulin will lower on its own. You don't have to do anything else. Don't worry about your brain not getting enough glucose or too little glucose when you go on a low carb diet. Your liver has you covered. It'll protect you through a genius process called gluconeogenesis. Glucose, which is energy, neo, which means new, and genesis, which means the origin of formation. In this case, the manufacturing of energy for your body. In this image here, this is an Alzheimer's brain and a healthy brain. You can see lots of holes on the right. The holes of cells, of brain cells that are lost, that have died. The really wide ventricles form, and we know that this occurs over a great many years, 10, 20 years. If we were to intervene, say 10 years before, we'd expect some cell loss, but as you can see, there's a lot more of the white matter. That's the stuff that we want to have. If we were to intervene 20 or 30 years before, we would hope to maintain full cell function in cells without the loss. And that's why early intervention is so very important. These black holes are brain dead cells that have been starved to death. And this is one reason why, as parents, we have such a great opportunity as grandparents to be able to influence our youth into eating a proper diet. That's why the girls that are with us, our daughters, we watch them, we help them. We don't shame them into eating the, only the healthy food. We educate them, we teach them, and then they just want to do it on their own. We don't demonize carbohydrates or demonize candy. There's a place for it. We just do it in a very moderated way. And we always, for example, we to minimize the amount of insulin flooding their body, and in this case, their brain, we say, no, you can't have candy before dinner. You can't have carbohydrates and sugars on an empty stomach. You always have it with a protein. That's kind of our slogan here is, if I want a treat, okay, have it with a protein. And so it helps minimize the flooding of the insulin. So we don't demonize it, but look at the effect that we can have if we just do some preventative. So I'm going to ask you to ask yourself this. What are the things that I can do to reduce my risk today? The first thing you can do is start moving around. Get out and walk, swim, lift some weights. There's a small percentage of the population that has a gene. Less than 1% of these people have this gene. It's a genetic form of precursor of Alzheimer's that can lead to Alzheimer's. That's the very uncommon familiar form of early onset Alzheimer's. But remember, it's less than 1% of the entire population. The gene is called APOE4. I don't know how they come up with these names, but not really easy to remember. But if you have it, you can't do anything about it. But you still can do a lot about the environmental factors. This APOE4 doesn't actually cause Alzheimer's, but together with the other factors such as lifestyle, like eating too many carbohydrates, raising your insulin levels, not getting out and moving, not putting your brain under new learning situations, that's getting you closer to the edge of how you can get and develop Alzheimer's disease. It's kind of like a person with red hair and their increased risk of getting a sunburn. The red hair gene, which I have, doesn't cause sunburns, but put together with other environmental conditions like being in the sun for too long without any sunscreen, you're going to be more at risk. Makes sense, right? So eliminate the environmental risks. Now, a team in Australia has followed a group of women, about 400 in Melbourne. When the study began, the women were at ages 45 to 55. They were monitored for the next 20 years. A wide range of assessments were done, from physical measurements, the biomarkers, and a battery of neuropsychiatric tests. Okay, and what they were looking for is they're looking at the study. What does the brain look like before the disease actually happens? Now, a lot of the studies that we've been looking at is after cognitive decline and dementia has already hit, usually in participants 60 or 70 years old. This is when cognitive decline starts to show up on the outside, but not on the inside. So they wanted to study what it is on the inside of the brain before they had any of those symptoms. And what they found so far is that the most important preventative factor against cognitive decline that they're seeing, even when they have normal blood pressure, all right, and good levels of cholesterol, the healthy ones, but number one being physical activity. That was the number one beginning stage. During the study, some were exercising in the study, some were not. They did even, the way that they are measuring is they did this word memory test, where they had given them a set of words and then see how many they could remember by repeating them back to them. Okay, the group was exercising, and then another group would not exercise. But the exercising group could recall many more of the words. Now remember, these are women that are 45 to 55. These weren't 80-year-old women. They were younger women, but still, just the fact of exercising helped them remember the words. Interesting. In the study, they're not prescribing what kind of physical exercise that they had to do. It was all about just being active, doing something on a daily basis. Now, I'll add that based on my other web classes I've done on this topic, I suggest that if you are going to exercise, do it when you're fasting. You got to throw in some weight-bearing exercises, resistance. You got to tone up and strengthen those muscles. And if you're going to do cardio, which I recommend, do HIIT, high intense interval training. It's less time, it's less stress on your joints. You get more bang for your buck with less time in the gym. And it's what the science is telling us. So in another randomized controlled trial, an American neuroscientist, Eric Eckerson, has conducted several of these type of trials in older adults with both women and men, looking at the effect of moderate exercise on brain size and memory. So he went a little bit further. In the 2011 trial was really pretty cool. It's very provocative. One, it had 150 relatively inactive people. They're allocated to either a aerobic walking group or a restriction group, one that was doing, like bands. They'd come in for the same amount of time, 3 days a week. So the main difference between the two groups is the intensity of the activity. The walking group is getting moderate intensity, and the other groups is just stretching with more of a light intensity, not really breathing hard, not really burning that muscle, right? Before the participants began their activities, their brains were scanned, imaged with an MRI machine and magnetic resonance imaging, and that allowed them to take very high resolution, detailed images of their brain. And we can see here, as you can see, the ones on the top had more of the color zone. That's good. The ones on the bottom showed shrinking of the brain, actually a reduction of the brains. Those are the ones that were more inactive, not as intense of exercises. So look at the difference in those diagrams. Pretty striking. Now, astounding, same study, they found that they were really focusing on the hippocampus, a region that is critical to memory formation. So if you were to stick your fingers in your ears, just take your pointing finger, stick it in your ears, and if you did that, you're essentially pointing right at your hippocampus. Your hippocampus sits right behind, on the inside of your ears. It's in a little bit deeper in the center of your brain. Normal aging sees a decline in the size of your hippocampus of about 1 to 2% a year after the age of 50. So for example, for me, if I was just a regular person, I'm 57, I could have anywhere from 7 to 14% smaller hippocampus if I was not exercising. No, I like to think that mine's bigger because I am exercising, and I also do pretty intense exercises, and studies show that even stimulates the hippocampus even more. Now, astounding in this trial, with just brisk walking, right, and I do a lot more than that, and you can too, they actually could reverse the decline. Here in this image, the red line is showing the normal decline of the brain size. See how it's going down after 1 year? In the group of walkers, in the blue line, we're seeing not only that it's less, but it's actually getting higher. It's actually getting larger. That's great. The change in the size of the structure amounted to about 2% increase in the hippocampus. All right, so let's kind of put this in perspective. It's like rolling back the clock of about 1 to 2 years in the term of aging of the hippocampus. So they were able to roll back by 1 to 2 years over the period of a year. So it's as if time stood still for the lower group, the 1% group, and actually turned back into time for the group that hit at 2%. And since we know that the hippocampus is involved in memory function, we know that exercise influences the hippocampus, and we know that the deterioration of the hippocampus begins with age, and to Alzheimer's disease, diminishing that, reducing that. This is plenty of reasons that you want to enlarge your hippocampus through something as simple as exercise, right? Anybody can do a brisk walk. You don't have to do the type of workout that I teach. You can do just moving around. Will have very clinical and meaningful impact on your memory through this exercise. Wouldn't you do it? So now that we've looked at what exercise can do, let's look at what food can do. Now, there's been plenty of research over the years showing that the cardiovascular benefits of a healthy diet. Now there's more mounting evidence that changing within a diet, that changes within a healthy diet, even more changes of such things like reducing carbohydrate intake, right, can make a huge impact. A lot of research looked at the Mediterranean diet, and one of those investigation was in Australia again, imaging biomarkers and lifestyle study known as the ABLE study. It investigated the effect of a Western diet, in other words, a high-carb diet, versus a Mediterranean diet or a low-carb diet, but not as low as the one that we do here, on cognitive change in a group of 500 people. The ABLE study, which is a long study over 8 years, clearly showed that people who followed a lower carb diet like the Mediterranean diet and the ABLE study have a lower risk of Alzheimer's, and there's a lot of lower levels of beta amyloid in their brain. Now remember, beta amyloid is the beginning of your brain's dying, right? So now, why, you may ask, why do I keep on bringing up the Mediterranean diet when we don't follow per se the Mediterranean diet? Because it's a higher carbohydrate diet than the one that we teach. However, I'm showing the great impact of that you can get by just reducing your carbohydrate intake over the American diet. And you can have even greater increases if you dropped it below the Mediterranean diet into a traditionally low-carb diet or a ketogenic diet like the one that we teach here. So there's been some research from Professor Susan D. Lamont. We all know that insulin is the hormone best known for controlling the amount of blood glucose in the body. But insulin also plays an active role in the brain, in that it aids in the uptake of glucose in the brain's nerve cells. As we've talked about, without that glucose, the brain can starve to death and die. And if you're not eating a carb diet, don't worry, because your body, your liver, will make the glucose your brain needs, as long as there's not something blocking the glucose that's getting to your brain. And insulin will help regulate the chemicals involved in the brain signaling. But insulin also has an effect on keeping your brain neurons alive. In a study that Professor Suzanne De La Monte did, her team blocked the action of insulin in the brain of rats to see if it had any effect. The results were pretty profound. What they did is they put them in this maze, right? It's called the water maze. The rats were tested to see how long it took for them to learn where the platform is that they could stand on. It was just below the surface of the water, but they couldn't see it. They would swim around until they find this platform, and the smarter they are, the faster they find the platform. Even if they can't see it, they're eventually going to find it, right? They know that they just need to swim around. But the rats lose their hippocampal functions because they're knocked out, because they block the insulin receptor in some of the rats. those rats spend a lot longer looking for the platform. They don't remember where they've been swimming. And in subsequent tests, they don't remember where they found it last time when they do eventually come across it. And so they have slow and sloppy in their learning. These rats developed amyloid plaques, just like the ones found in peoples with Alzheimer's. Many of the features that are looked for in Alzheimer's were also present in these rats. I think that helped to fortify the hypothesis that let me move that back there. The hypothesis that Alzheimer's is a metabolic disease similar to diabetes. That's why some are saying, let's call it diabetes of the brain or type 3 diabetes. Pretty much these studies confirm that it is confined to the brain. And the reason why we die is because the brain, without a brain, our body can't function. Now, this is a pretty tempting thesis, but the other researchers believe that prevention likely involves more than just the factor of the insulin and the glucose. It's about a combination, such as diet and exercise. We've talked about putting the brain under new learning tests, making your brain stay active, like social engagement, going out and meeting new people, memorizing new names, new faces, new experiences, new places, try a new restaurant. Don't go to the same one. Learn the new menu, try new taste buds. This is all forming new brain experiences. This is all excellent stuff for our brain. Now, Associate Professor Claire Anderson at the Monash Institute of Cognitive and Clinical Neurosciences, that's a mouthful, studies a common idea of the pillars of health, which is diet, exercise, and sleep. All right, interestingly enough, sleep is essential for a host of reasons, including brain function and against fighting Alzheimer's. Now, recently we've learned that one specific stage of sleep is critical for memory formation, right? And we know this because if we deprive an individual of slow wave sleep, which is the deep sleep, memory is severely impacted. And if we enhance slow wave sleep, we enhance memory performance. But as you age, you spend much less time in that memory forming slow wave sleep phase. Randy Gartner, we kind of developed this, this la la land in this days, right? Randy Gartner, today he's 68 years old, but when he was 17 years old, he set a world record for staying awake more than 264 hours. That's 11 days. Now, while longer sleep episodes of sleep deprivation have been noted in individuals up to 450 hours, wow, that's almost double, right? That's 20 days. In one case, by this Dr. William Dement, what he did that was different is that he actually put brain probes on Randy when he was going through his 11-day wake up marathon, right? William Dement does research at Stanford University, and he had the opportunity to observe and record Gardner's brain waves throughout the whole ordeal. Now, as you might expect, things weren't always super clear sailing for Randy. After 3 days, Gardner was getting moody and losing coordination skills. Bit by bit, his senses were being affected, including the sense of smell. By the 5th day, he was hallucinating, and his brain would slip into a dreamlike state, like that la la land that I call, or I tease teenagers of having a lot of, right? A follow-up analysis of Gardner's brain activity found that he wasn't quite as fully awake as it appeared, with various parts of the brain completely shutting down for its own little snooze from time to time. Where this gets particularly interesting is the fact that those findings are in stark contrast with experiments that had earlier been conducted on sleep deprivation of animals, where animals would die without sleep. In 1898, 2 Italian psychologists kept dogs awake by constantly waking them up over a period of several weeks. That's just rude. until tragically these poor dogs died from what appeared to be a degradation of various nerves in the brain and spinal cord. And you can read that study right there. Similar experiments have been done on rats, also showing that a lack of sleep can be deadly to rats. So the idea is that for some reason, humans appear to have evolved a neurological trick similar to those like that some birds and aquatic animals or mammals have. They have an ability to shut down part of the brain for maintenance while kind of staying awake a little bit. In today's busy world, we might be tempted to cut back on our sleeping hours. And I want to tell you, it comes at a heavy, heavy cost. Karen O'Keefe from the Sleep Wake Research Center at Massey University in New Zealand, a place that I'll be going this year with my wife, gladly, said that a lack of sleep dramatically raises the risk of injury or accident while carrying out safety sensitive tasks. For example, lack of sleep has been shown to substantially increase our risk of having motor vehicle accidents. O'Keefe cites a U.S. study that indicated having between 4 and 5 hours of sleep made you 4 times more likely to have a motor accident. You don't want to have a motor accident? You got to get your sleep. You're going to have 400% higher chances of getting in a car wreck if you don't get your sleep, all right? With respect to risk of work-related injury, a large U.S. study has shown that workers who got less than 5 hours of sleep were 2.7, almost 3 times more likely to have work-related injury than those who got 7 to 8 hours of sleep. In the long term, lack of sleep has been shown to lead to problems with physical health, such as increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, as well as risk of just depression, anxiety, insulin resistance. Do you see how all those things we know are related to now Alzheimer's? So it has its part, it plays its role. With too little sleep is going to increase your chances of even Alzheimer's. And you've heard me report that too little sleep can actually cause regional insulin resistance, right? And you know that that can lead to type 2 diabetes and something we just don't want any part of. Participation in physical activity, getting your sleep, being socially active, and eating a low-carb diet won't erase your chances 100 down to 0 of getting Alzheimer's or cognitive decline. However, if following this advice just cuts your chances by 50%, wouldn't it be worth it? Studies suggest that you can do it far more than 50, but even if you cut your odds by 25%, wouldn't it still be worth it to reduce your chances of this terrible disease? Nothing is going to completely eliminate all your risk. We're human beings. We're living a riskful world. There's going to be chances, right? But the time to start turning your ship away from Alzheimer's and chronic disease is today. I like this phrase. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant that tree is today. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I care about your health. That's why I've committed my life to this task. Going out, reading, studying these clinical research, new information, cutting edge, so that we can adopt it into your daily lifestyle. That's why we started this company. That's why we have these products. That's why I changed my career. I'm committed to it. I'm asking you, can you be committed to helping increasing your own health, your own life? Share in this data, meaning take it on, use it in your life. If it just starts out with just cutting your carbohydrates by 50%, 25% from what you're eating now, and start walking. Do a brisk walk. You've already taken huge leaps to reducing your shrinking brain and plaque buildup. So that's my message for today. Share it amongst your loved ones. Ask people to come by for our next week's program, and I'll do my best to make sure that you have some new tips how to make your life healthier. Thank you again, and I'll see you later. I'm going to check the notes real quick. I do have a couple of questions. The question is it true that people over 55 need more protein in their diet due to a lack of digestion? I take 3-believe peptide protein, Pro 22. Could this cause me any problems, or could this be of great help to me at the age of 72? My muscles have increased and I feel great. Sorry for the long question. Okay. No, this is there's the question basically is people over 55. The studies have shown that people as they approach about 45, 50 years old need to have more protein for a couple of reasons. Digestion is one reason, but that really affects all ages because we're not having today a very healthy microbiome, digestive enzymes that are breaking down those proteins efficiently. But aside from that, as we get older, we need more protein than someone that's younger, excluding the youth. When they're in those years, they're still growing bones and muscle and tissue, right? They need about the same amount of protein as someone that's older. So the answer is yes, you do need more protein as you go older. So the rule of 0.5 gram per pound of lean muscle mass is not applying to those that are older. You need a little bit more. How much more? About instead of 0.5 gram, 0.75 gram would be a good measure to start going with. The Pro 22 has a higher concentration of protein. The peptide is another great way because the peptide protein is even a booster because the elderly need those type of collagen proteins. We all can benefit from collagen. I take the collagen, but it's especially important for those that are older. So great question. And if you follow that protocol that Bob was talking about in this question, you're going to indirectly also lower your carbohydrate intake, which also then going to mean that you're doing a good recipe for avoiding Alzheimer's, which was the topic of today's lesson. So it played into what we're doing. Follow that. You'll get what I call as a twofer, reducing your risks of Alzheimer's and getting the protein that you need. Good that your muscles are stronger. You're feeling great. Glad to hear it, Bob. And I'm glad that you've enjoyed the products in the program. Looks like, let me scroll through here real quick. Any other questions? Looks like the only one for today. Thank you very much, and we will see you later on.